Some nights, we don't fall asleep because we're tired, but because a memory gently unbuttons itself, just enough to make us ache. Tonight, I'll take you somewhere soft. 3 letters, 3 rooms, and the quiet spaces where clothes and hearts once fell. But before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from? And who was the last person who made you forget what time it was? Leave your answer in the comments, and perhaps you'll see them again between the lines. I still remember the way the curtains swayed that night, stirred by a wind that never quite reached us. We had just arrived in Vienna, jet-lagged, overworked, and still carrying the quiet hangover of a failed conference. She was in heels too tall for comfort, her coat clinging to her in the cold rain, and I had offered to help with her suitcase not because I was polite, but because I wanted an excuse to stand closer to her. I think she knew that. Our hotel, the last available for miles thanks to an overbooked music festival, was quaint in the wrong ways. It had a winding staircase, a rattling lift that smelled of old varnish, and an over-enthusiastic night manager who spoke rapid German. We both politely nodded through. But the real problem wasn't the decor. It was the room. Just one. One bed. A double. We asked for 2, I had said. 2 singles. 2 rooms. Anything with the word 2 in it. I am terribly sorry, the night manager replied, shrugging with finality. There is only this one. She looked at me. I looked at her, her eyebrow arched, slightly amused, slightly annoyed, but mostly unreadable. It's fine, she said, far too quickly. We'll figure it out. And then, there we were. Room 204, a heavy door, a key that still required turning, a single bed, 2 sets of nerves. She unwrapped her scarf slowly, like she was delaying what came next. Her hair, damp and tangled, fell over one shoulder. I looked away, not out of respect, but because I didn't trust myself. She slipped off her coat and hung it neatly by the door, revealing a dress I hadn't fully seen earlier. Navy blue, form-fitting, with sleeves that stopped just above her elbows. The kind of dress that made you wonder what it would feel like to run your fingers along the edge of the fabric, and then further. She caught me watching. I'll take the couch, I said, too fast, gesturing at the pathetic love seat by the window. It looked like it would break under a suitcase, let alone a grown man. She smiled. Let's just lie down. On opposite sides. It's just for a night. But the bed was too soft. The rain too persistent. The silence too full of what neither of us was saying. There's something about lying that close to someone when you're not supposed to. The way the air thickens. The way you notice every shift. Every breath. She turned once, then twice. I stayed still, pretending to sleep, but I could feel her, the heat of her body, the scent of her shampoo, something floral, something faintly sweet like jasmine, with something darker underneath. I'm sorry, she whispered at some point. For what? For everything this trip didn't turn out to be. Her voice was quiet, coated in something more than exhaustion, maybe disappointment, maybe regret. We'll laugh about it next week, I replied, or pretend it never happened. She laughed once, softly, like a breath catching in the throat. I don't think I'll pretend this didn't happen. There was a pause, the kind of pause that holds its breath with you. You cold? I asked. A little. I reached for the blanket between us, pulling it over her more than myself. Our fingers touched, briefly, but it felt longer than it was. She didn't pull away. You always this kind? She asked, turning slightly to face me. Her eyes were shadows in the dark, but I could feel them. Only when it's raining, I said. And only with you. We didn't touch again. Not that night. But the tension curled itself around us like the Vienna wind. Quiet, pressing, undeniable. I could feel her heartbeat in the way she breathed, and when she finally drifted off to sleep, I didn't. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how close a man can be to a woman before he forgets the promises he never made. The rain had stopped sometime around 4. I knew this not because I had been awake, but because the silence woke me. That, and the fact that she was no longer on her side of the bed. She stood by the window, barefoot, her back to me, outlined against the pale blue light of a Vienna dawn. The dress she had worn the night before was still on, but the zipper had been half undone, not in a revealing way, but in a way that made me wonder if she'd tried to take it off, then changed her mind. Or maybe someone else was supposed to do it for her. She didn't turn around when she spoke. You didn't sleep. Not really, I said, voice hoarse with the weight of unsaid things. You? She laughed lightly. Only when I forgot where I was. She looked back at me then, slowly, as if testing the distance. I sat up, unsure of what my hands should do, what my eyes should avoid. Coffee? She asked. I nodded. Desperately. She walked past me, slowly, barefoot still, and the scent of her, warm from sleep and skin, followed. She reached for the hotel kettle, the little porcelain cups. The sound of water boiling filled the space between our thoughts. I've stayed in 100 hotel rooms, she said as the kettle clicked, but none ever felt like this. Cramped, underdressed. No, she said, smiling without looking up. Observed. I wanted to ask what she meant. Instead, I took the cup from her, our fingers brushing again. She let the contact linger, just a second too long. We don't have to talk about it, I offered. But we will, won't we? Eventually. She walked back to the bed and sat beside me. We sipped quietly. Then she said it, so softly it might have been to herself. I almost kissed you last night. I didn't move. I know, I said. You didn't. I did. She turned to me, her gaze gentle but unflinching. Why didn't you? There was no dramatic music, No crashing wave of sudden desire, just a quiet stillness. Two people sitting too close, with too much unsaid between them. Because I wasn't sure if it was loneliness or you, I admitted. Her smile faded slightly, and now I'm still not sure, I said. But I know I don't want to wonder for the rest of my life. She set her cup down, slowly, with the kind of care that only comes before something breaks. What if we regret it? What if we regret not? A silence. Then, I'm taking off my dress, she said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a performance. It was a truth, offered plainly. She stood, fingers reaching for the zipper, and this time she didn't stop halfway. She let it fall, and the soft whisper of fabric brushing her skin was the loudest sound I had heard in years. She didn't turn, not yet, just stood there, vulnerable, not for what she had revealed, but for what it meant to be seen. And I, still seated, still unsure, whispered, "Come here." When she did, the bed dipped beneath her weight, and her shoulder touched mine, bare and warm. I ran a hand along her back, not to possess, but to remember this shape, this softness, this human truth between us. We didn't rush. There was no hunger, only gravity, the kind that pulls two people slowly together when the rest of the world has fallen away. Her hands found mine, my lips found her temple, and the space between us, for 1 hour in Vienna, no longer existed. But it wasn't about the kiss, or the touch, or the breath shared beneath a rain-washed window. It was the silence after, the silence that didn't ask, "What now?" but said, "We were here, and that's enough." The light came in slowly, the way it does only in unfamiliar cities, soft, amber-edged, filtered through linen curtains that had long since lost their stiffness. It painted the room like a half-remembered dream. She was still beside me, her breath steady, her back to my chest. Her fingers curled gently beneath her chin like she had fallen asleep mid-thought. One of my hands rested at her waist, the other beneath the pillow we now shared. We hadn't spoken since that moment. There had been nothing more to say, and somehow, everything had already been said in silence. I don't know when I fell asleep, but I do remember waking up and feeling, for a fleeting moment, that the world had been reset. As if the rain, the bed, her, it had all been part of a dream too delicate to carry past morning. Then she stirred. Not much, just a shift, but enough to let the blanket fall slightly from her shoulder, exposing the warm curve of her skin and the bruise left by my mouth just beneath her collarbone. "I didn't think I'd sleep," she whispered, without turning. "You didn't," I murmured. "You drifted." "That's not the same thing." "No," I said, "but it's closer than nothing." She finally rolled toward me, tucking her arm beneath her head. Her hair was a soft, dark mess. Her expression unreadable, not cold, Not warm, but something in between. "This never happened," she said. I blinked. "What?" She smiled faintly. "Isn't that how these things go?" My chest tightened. "I don't want it to be one of those things." "But it already is, isn't it?" she replied gently. "We'll leave. You'll go back to your city. I'll go back to mine. And this room will forget us." I sat up, the sheets slipping from my chest. I didn't cover myself. Somehow, modesty felt more dishonest than bare skin. "I'm not ready to let this dissolve into a story," I said. She reached for her dress, still folded neatly over the arm of the chair. "Then what do you want it to be?" I wanted to tell her. That I remembered everything, the way she bit her lip when unsure, the sigh she gave just before sleep, the way her thumb traced invisible circles against my wrist when she thought I wouldn't notice, that none of it felt like a mistake, that I hadn't just undressed her body. I had been allowed, for one breathless night, into a part of her no one else had seen. But I didn't say any of it, because the truth is, sometimes even the most honest things don't fit in daylight. "I want breakfast," I said instead. That made her smile. "Room service? Too formal. Somewhere with chipped mugs and stale bread." She laughed. "You know how to romance a woman." I stood and pulled on my shirt, watching her slip back into her dress like it was armor. It looked different now, less mysterious, more fragile. We walked the streets together, side by side, without touching. The city had awakened in the soft hush of Sunday morning, bells tolling in the distance, cafes opening their doors with creaks and clinks. The pavement was still wet, the air still heavy with yesterday's rain. We found a small bakery tucked between two shuttered antique stores. She chose the seat by the window. I ordered strong coffee and apricot pastries, and we sat across from each other like old friends pretending to be strangers, or strangers pretending to be something more. "So," she said eventually, her eyes fixed on the fogged-up glass, "do we talk about it?" I broke off a piece of pastry and handed it to her. "We already did, last night. And nothing has changed." She chewed slowly. "But everything has." I nodded. Then, very softly, she asked, "Was I a mistake?" My heart clenched, not because of the question, but because of how much fear was hidden in the quiet way she asked. "No," I said, quickly. "You were the one thing that felt real in a city built like a postcard." She looked at me then, truly looked, and I saw something shift behind her eyes. Not love, not yet, but perhaps the place where love might begin, if given a little time and a second room. We didn't talk much after that. The walk back to the hotel was slow, but not hesitant. Just aware. Aware that time had become finite again, that the quiet between us wasn't a lull anymore, but an ending. I watched her pack. She folded her dress with precision, not the one she wore last night, but another dark plum with tiny, uneven stitches along the collar. She ran her fingers over the fabric like it held more than silk, like it remembered. Maybe it did. "I don't usually linger," she said, not looking up. "After things like this." "Is this a thing like this?" I asked. She paused, then zipped the suitcase shut and said, "I don't know what this is." I stood near the window. The glass was fogged again, even though the sun was fully up. Vienna had returned to itself, elegant, practiced, old. We were just passing through, but maybe not just. Her train was scheduled for 10:12, mine for 10:45. Different directions, different countries, but the same platform. We checked out in silence, keys returned, polite nods exchanged. The doorman didn't recognize us. We weren't the same people who'd walked in the day before. Or maybe we were, and that was the problem. The taxi ride was short, the kind of short that doesn't allow for real goodbyes. The station was already filling with the low chaos of mid-morning, hurried footsteps, rolling suitcases, the scent of cheap croissants and overwatered coffee. She turned to me on the platform, a paper ticket folded in her hand, like a love letter she never meant to send. "I'm scared," she said. "Of what?" "That I'll forget how this felt." "You won't." "Not the sex," she clarified, with the ghost of a smile. "That's easy to remember, easy to compare. I mean, the quiet, the in-between, the way we didn't rush anything." I nodded, swallowing a knot in my throat. "Me too." Her train arrived with a sigh, a long silver sigh that meant it was time. She didn't hug me, didn't kiss me, just stepped close, close enough that her breath touched my neck, and her voice was so quiet it was almost inside my chest. "If we see each other again," she whispered, "I want to start from the beginning, not the bed." I nodded, slowly, and she said, "But if I ever find myself lonely, I'll remember the way you touched my back when you thought I was asleep." She didn't wait for a response, just walked to the train door, climbed the steps, and didn't look back. I stayed on the platform long after her carriage vanished into the iron blur of departure, long after the announcements changed, long after I was supposed to go. I never boarded my train. Instead, I sat in the little cafe at the far end of the station, the one with chipped mugs, just like I'd imagined. I ordered a second coffee I didn't need, and then I pulled out the hotel stationery I'd taken without meaning to, and I wrote her a letter. I didn't know her last name. I didn't know her address. So I folded it carefully, slid it between the pages of my notebook, and promised myself that maybe someday, in some other city, I'd find a way to hand it to her. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe that letter would live between pages the same way she now lived between memory and regret. And maybe that's all we were ever meant to be. Not lovers, not even stories, but the feeling that lingers between the touch and the goodbye. It arrived on a Thursday, which already felt wrong. Thursdays are for forgotten grocery lists, not ghost stories. The small parcel bore no return address, just my name, typewritten on the label in that old-fashioned serif that looked like it belonged to a love letter or a death notice. I hadn't ordered anything, but I opened it. Inside, cushioned in yellowed tissue, was a necklace I hadn't seen in over 12 years. Thin gold chain, 3 pearls, one missing its shine. I knew it instantly. I had once unclasped it from her bare neck with shaking hands, and she had smiled, as if I had undone her instead of the necklace. Vienna, 12 years ago. A house I did not belong in, the kind you find only once. Part sea-washed retreat, part museum of someone else's memories. The kind of house where footsteps echo in the halls and mirrors don't always return your gaze. She had rented it for the summer, she said. Or maybe it belonged to a friend. Her story changed each time the wine glass emptied, but I didn't care. I had met her at a gallery on a rainy Tuesday, both of us standing too long before a portrait of a woman who looked exhausted by desire. I didn't expect her to speak to me. I certainly didn't expect her to invite me, days later, to the coast. But I went. And that night, the only night we ever shared, has followed me like perfume clinging to a letter that was never mailed. There is a moment, just before a kiss becomes a memory, when the air around it still hums. I remember that hum more than I remember the kiss, and I remember the exact second her necklace fell. It had been around her throat all evening, a delicate thing, barely visible against the flushed warmth of her skin. We had been speaking in half sentences by then, our feet bare against the wooden floor, 2 glasses left unfinished on the window ledge. She had leaned in to adjust the record player, something old and scratchy, Chopin, I think. And as she did, I stepped behind her, not to touch her, not yet, just to feel the nearness. The music began, and so did she. She swayed, softly, not for me, for herself. I placed my hand on the small of her back, and she didn't move away. I don't usually do this, she said. I didn't ask what she meant. Then, as she turned, the clasp gave out, or maybe she let it go, and the necklace slipped down her collarbone like a final petal in slow descent. It landed on the floor with the faintest clink, and the space between us changed. I didn't sleep with her, not in the way you're thinking. I undressed her, yes, but it was more like unwrapping something fragile. Not lust, exactly. Not yet. It was the anticipation of intimacy. The way she pulled me down beside her, fully clothed, and whispered stories that may have been lies or wishes. I used to be someone else, she told me, curled in my arms. Who? She didn't answer. The rain had stopped by then. The windows were fogged with breath, or time, or both. I remember tracing circles on her back through her slip, feeling the silk warm against her body. We kissed, eventually, but not hungrily, like people trying to slow time by tasting it. And then morning came, and she was gone. No note, No whisper of sheets disturbed, just the necklace, missing, her scent still on the pillow. I stayed another day, just in case. I walked the beach. I sat in the wicker chair she had curled in, trying to read the same book she left open on page 73, but she never returned, and I never found her again. Until now. The necklace was in my hand, still warm from the sun that must have touched the parcel during delivery. I turned it over, fingers trembling more than I expected. Attached was a single slip of paper, folded twice. It fell at 2:17 a.m. That's when I knew. No name, just that. I placed it on my desk and stared out the window. There was no sea here, just rooftops, power lines, the dull buzz of the present. But the hum, that hum I remembered, was back. And I knew I couldn't leave it alone. Not the necklace, not her. That night, I poured a glass of wine I didn't want. I placed the necklace on the kitchen table and turned on the old record player, the same one I had found at a flea market years ago, because it reminded me of her. I played Chopin, and then I let myself remember everything I had buried under polite routines and unfinished poems. Not just the way she looked, but the way she made me feel like my body wasn't separate from my soul. The way our clothes didn't fall in a rush, but like pages of a story being read aloud slowly, reverently. The way she ran her thumb along my jaw, as if memorizing regret before it happened. And the way I whispered, "Stay," though I knew she wouldn't. Some people leave, others vanish. She vanished. And now, after all these years, she was whispering again. Through a necklace, through a time-stamped note, through a night that never stopped echoing. And I, older now, slower, realized something that made my heart lurch. That hour, 2:17 a.m., it wasn't when her necklace fell. It was when I fell for her. I didn't sleep that night. Not deeply, anyway. My body lay still, but my mind wandered the corridors of the past, barefoot, opening doors I hadn't touched in years. The necklace rested on the nightstand, catching the moonlight in a way that made it look like a question mark drawn in gold. And her note, that slip of truth or trickery, whispered from the desk drawer. It fell at 2:17 a.m. That's when I knew. Knew what? That she loved me, that she never could, that she had to leave before dawn unfastened something deeper than a clasp. By morning, I had made a decision, not a loud one, but the kind that hums beneath your ribs. I would return to the house. The drive was longer than I remembered, but then again, memories are liars. They shorten distances and sweeten silences. But the turns still came back to me like old songs. The roundabout with the rusted sign, the bakery with no name, the final slope where the sea begins to announce itself. And then it stood before me, the house. It hadn't aged well. The shutters hung tired. Ivy had swallowed part of the front wall, but it was hers, ours. I stood at the gate and waited, as if for permission. The wind answered, salty, wistful, familiar. I stepped inside. The interior smelled like dust and lavender, as if time had tried to preserve what love had abandoned. I moved slowly, touching furniture like you touch old photographs, reverently, with disbelief. The record player was gone. So was the book she left open. But the wicker chair remained. So did the small mark on the floorboards where her wine glass had tipped when we laughed too hard about something I can't remember. And then I found it, in the guest room drawer, under a stack of faded postcards. A letter, unsent, unfinished. The ink was hers. I would have known it anywhere, a little too upright, a little too neat for someone so wildly unsure. You told me you'd forget this, but I won't. I'll carry the moment like perfume on my wrists. If you ever return, I hope the house remembers how we whispered. It stopped there, a line left hanging like a breath not taken. I pressed the page to my chest. It didn't ache. It pulsed. That night, I didn't stay at a hotel. I slept in the house, alone, again, but not untouched by her. I lit a candle instead of switching on the lights. I opened the windows to let the sea in. I poured the same wine we once drank, a red too dry for summer, but perfect for remembering. I placed the necklace beside me in bed, and I whispered stories back to her. At 2:17 a.m. I woke up. No reason, no sound, just instinct. I turned, and for a second, just a second, I thought I saw her in the hallway mirror, a blur, a pause. But it was only me, and maybe that was the cruelest part, that after all this time, I was the ghost. The next morning, I walked down to the beach. The tide had left behind pieces of glass, rounded soft by time, little truths that once cut. I picked one up and stared through it. The world became blurry, like how she once looked through her wine glass at me, grinning like she knew I'd follow her anywhere. And I did. I sat in the sand, and I remembered her laugh, how it curved, how it didn't quite belong to any one country or age. And then I remembered what she said, just before we fell asleep that night, 12 years ago. "Don't look for me," she had murmured. "But if you do, don't expect the same woman." I hadn't, but I expected a trace, a sign, a door slightly ajar. And just as I thought it, the wind shifted. Something flickered, a sound, soft, like a sigh wrapped in paper. I turned. On the old dock, there was a woman. She stood with her back to me, a shawl loose around her shoulders, her hair coiled in the same careless way. It couldn't be, but my feet moved before reason caught up. I didn't call her name. I didn't even have one to call. I walked until I was 10 steps away. She turned. It wasn't her. But the woman smiled kindly, as if she understood. "Looking for something?" she asked. I looked at her, not as a woman, but as a mirror. and I said the truth. Someone, but I'm not sure she ever existed. Later, back at the house, I found something I hadn't noticed before. Behind a loose panel in the wall, there was a small box, wooden, worn, hers. Inside, a matchbook from a hotel in Prague, a train ticket, a dried flower I had once tucked behind her ear, and a second necklace, identical, except the pearl missing from the first, was here. That's when I knew. She hadn't left, not fully. She had placed breadcrumbs in the dark, not for me to find her, but to remind me I was found. That night, I wrote a letter, not to send, just to write. It fell at 2:17 a.m., but I didn't know then. Now I do. The box stayed unopened for hours. I placed it on the kitchen table, the same spot where she used to slice figs and leave sugar cubes half melted in tea sauces. It felt like she was there, just out of reach, as if I had walked into the room seconds too late. I sat before it with a glass of wine, watching the wood, the grain, the tiny brass clasp she must have touched countless times. I imagined her fingers, nimble, ringless, pressing it shut in one last quiet gesture, never quite ready to say goodbye. I opened it at dusk. Inside, the second necklace, a twin to the one I had found, this one complete, pearl intact, clasp unbroken, and tucked beneath it, folded twice and still carrying her scent, not perfume, not lavender, but her. A letter. If you found this, it means you came back. I always believed you might, but I couldn't stay waiting, not forever, not as the tide turned and turned and turned. I'm writing this not because I expect you to understand, but because I want you to remember the last night, the last light. She had written about the night we tangled in candlelight, speaking less with our voices than with our breaths, about how, afterward, she had watched me sleep, tracing my spine with the tip of her finger, spelling silent sentences I never felt. You always thought it was the moment we undressed that mattered, she wrote, but it wasn't. It was the moment after, when neither of us spoke, just breath, skin, the unbearable intimacy of not needing to perform. I paused there. My throat tightened. How many times had I replayed that evening in my mind, polishing it like glass until even the shadows gleamed? We had danced slowly, barefoot on the wooden floor. No music, only the hush of the sea through the window and the creak of our bodies remembering how to belong to each other. She had unbuttoned my shirt with deliberation, not seduction. It wasn't about arousal then. It was about memory, about being seen, not for who we were, but for how we had once made each other feel. And afterward, she had stayed awake. I had drifted. She had studied me, quietly, as if mourning a future we never reached. Beneath the letter, I found something else. A cassette tape. No label, no case. Just a coil of magnetic memory waiting to speak. I hadn't owned a player in years, but the house hadn't let go of its ghosts. In the study, behind a faded curtain, I found the old player, the same one she used to play Chopin from on Sunday mornings, when she'd wear nothing but his shirt and her questions. I slid the tape in, pressed play. There was silence. Then, the low crackle of old recording. Her voice. If you're listening, you've come too late. But maybe you came exactly when you were meant to. Her tone was soft, almost amused. The way she sounded when we lay on the floor, limbs entangled, her lips near my ear as she asked me impossible things. Do you remember the hour the necklace fell? It wasn't just the clasp that loosened. It was everything. My body, my resolve, the idea that I could ever leave without taking a piece of you with me. I sat motionless, the candle flickering beside me, its light tracing the curve of the wine glass, a reflection of us once again. I left not because I stopped loving you, but because I didn't know how to love myself when I was with you. You were too much like the mirror, and I couldn't bear to see my own hunger so clearly. She paused. The silence that followed felt heavier than her voice. But if you're still listening, it means part of you still aches. And if that ache leads you here, to this moment, then let it be enough. I'll be the space in your bed, the perfume in the pillowcase, the memory that never closes its eyes. The tape clicked, ended. I sat there for what must have been hours. I didn't cry. Tears would have made it simpler, a release. But I felt something quieter, deeper, a loosening of something I didn't know was clenched. And then, instinctively, I walked to the bedroom, lit a single candle, opened the window, and I lay down, just as I had once, shirt unbuttoned, the way she had left me, the necklace between my collarbones, cool, familiar. And I whispered, I remember now. It wasn't the undressing. It was what came after. It was you, the you who watched me sleep and left before I woke, but never stopped speaking. Outside, the wind sighed against the window. Inside, the past folded into the present, not forgiven, not forgotten, but finally felt, to be continued in part 4, where morning brings a visitor who claims to have known her, perhaps more recently than he has. A box of old photographs arrives with a note in a different hand, and at the bottom, a postcard from the hotel in Prague, her handwriting or someone mimicking it with a single line. There's still time, but not much. I woke to the hush of morning, not silence. No, the house was never truly silent, but that delicate stillness just before the day fully wakes, when the walls exhale and the dust in the sunbeams begins its slow, suspended dance. I was still wearing the necklace. It had shifted in the night, the pearl resting now at my shoulder like a quiet sentinel. The sheet was tangled at my waist. I had slept deeply, dreamlessly, as if some weight had finally risen from my chest. I stayed like that for a while, listening, remembering, and then the knock. 3 soft raps at the door, not urgent, not hesitant, familiar somehow, like the past had learned how to use its knuckles. He stood there in a tan coat, grey at the temples, the kind of face you might forget in a crowd, but never in a quiet room. "I hope I have the right place," he said. I nodded. He looked down at the package in his arms, a shallow wooden box bound in twine, corners worn like it had been carried far. "She wanted you to have this," he said. "Who are you?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. He gave a quiet smile. "A chapter she didn't finish writing. After he left, I brought the box inside. There was a note, paper soft with age, though the ink was fresh. The handwriting, not hers. She spoke of you often, in the mornings especially, when the coffee hadn't cooled and her eyes still carried the shadows of someone she dreamed about. Inside the box, photographs, old, square, with curled edges. Her in winter coats, in alleys lined with laundry, in sun-washed fields I'd never seen. But there, the one that stole my breath. Her, sitting by a hotel window, legs bare, wrapped in one of my old shirts. And on the back, in her unmistakable scrawl, "I never stopped wearing pieces of you." Below the photographs, a single postcard. It was from Prague, faded and soft at the corners, as if handled often. The image, a hotel I vaguely recognized, the kind with ornate balconies and peeling charm. And on the back, her writing again, more rushed this time, like she didn't want to think too long before sending it. There's still time, but not much. That was all. No return address, no date, just that sentence, dangling like a lifeline. I sat with the box in my lap, that same tightness returning to my throat. How many years had I spent clutching at shadows, afraid to chase them in case they vanished? Now, I had something tangible, a place, a chance. And for the first time in years, I felt the strange flicker of hope. Dangerous, yes, but undeniable. I packed lightly. The hotel was tucked behind a curved cobbled street, its shutters half open, its paint weathered. It looked exactly as the postcard had shown, only older, lonelier, like a memory trying to stay alive. I didn't ask for her at the desk, didn't say her name, just requested the same room from the postcard, room 305. The woman at the counter looked at me strangely, then nodded, as if this sort of thing happened more than once. The room was small, quiet. The window framed a sky already leaning towards dusk. And there, on the bedside table, another envelope, my name in her script. "If you made it this far, you're braver than I was." My fingers trembled. I left pieces of myself in every place we touched. A cup in Florence, a pillow in Lisbon. But here, I left something more. You always said I was a mystery you wanted to solve, but I was never the mystery. You were. The way you looked at me in the dark, as if I was the answer to a question you hadn't asked yet. I wrote this on the night I watched you sleep, when the candle burned low and your chest rose so slowly. I thought, if I pressed my lips to your back just once more, I might stay forever. But I didn't. I kissed the air instead. If you've come here, it means something inside you still aches. And if it aches, it means I'm still alive in you. That's enough. I folded the letter, pressed it to my lips, and for a moment, I let myself believe she was still in the room, just out of frame. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay with the window open. The breeze carried the scent of lavender and old brick. And I whispered her name once, not loud, just enough to hear how it sounded in this place. I imagined her walking through that door. No dramatic reunion, no weeping, just her smile, tired knowing, just her fingers brushing the necklace still round my neck, and her voice, there you are. And somewhere, a letter she never sent drifts through time, still waiting to be found, still holding the hour she chose not to forget. I found it tucked beneath an old French novel, her glove, the left one, folded like a question no one had dared to answer. The scent hit me before the memory did. Not perfume exactly, but something more personal. Skin warmed by dusk. The faintest trace of lavender soap. A whisper of something floral, but wild, untamed, like her. And just like that, I was back in Lyon. Spring, 1987. The room with the green shutters. She had worn them only once. The gloves, pale cream leather, stitched at the wrist, lined with silk the color of bone. She had said they were her mother's, then smirked, saying she wore them for no reason other than to feel a bit more like someone worth undressing. I remember the way she peeled them off that night, not rushed, but slowly, deliberately, as if removing a layer of language. She let one fall to the floor and left it there, but the other she handed to me, pressing it into my palm, like a secret. Smell it, she said. Why? I asked. So you'll remember me later, she whispered, when I'm gone. I did, and I do. Back then, I'd been living above a bakery, the kind where the scent of bread mixed with the scrape of violin strings from the alley, the kind of place no one lives in forever, but everyone returns to in memory. I first saw her at dusk, the golden hour casting long shadows on Rue Saint-Cyr. She stood beside a cafe table, sketching with one hand and drinking vermouth with the other. Her hair, dark, messily pinned, strands falling as though even they couldn't bear to leave her skin. She wore a linen dress, unbuttoned just enough to let the breeze know her, and on her lap, a glove. The other one dangled lazily from the edge of the chair like a forgotten thought. She didn't look up when I passed, but she smirked, as if she already knew I'd stop. We met the way certain chords meet, slightly out of tune, then suddenly perfect. I spoke clumsy French. She answered in even clumsier English. But we both spoke sketchbook, cafe napkins, the silence between notes. Do you always draw strangers? I asked on our third meeting. Only when I hope they'll become less strange, she said. Is that what I am? Not yet. Her flat was above a dressmaker's shop, where the mannequins changed faster than the seasons. She let me in the first time without turning on the lights, guiding me by the soft tug of one gloved hand. The other, as always, was bare. The walls were filled with photographs, none of people, just shadows, hallways, feet, mirrors catching half of her face, and on the windowsill, a line of perfume bottles with no labels. She made her own, she said, mixing oils and memory. She called them moments that refuse to fade. That night, her shoulder brushed mine as she reached for a bottle. She didn't ask permission when she dabbed it on my collarbone. The scent, like crushed roses, yes, but something deeper, animalic, intimate. That one's called the fourth hour, she said. Of what? Of being alone with someone before they stop being a stranger. We never made rules, never said words like forever or love, but our silences were full of things we didn't dare name. We spoke through touch, through glances left hanging just too long, and once, only once, through a letter she never signed. I like how you look at me when I pretend not to notice. I like how you never ask me what I'm thinking. I like how you smell after staying in my sheets. I like how you don't press to know why I cry when I laugh. That glove, the one I found today, still carried the shape of her fingers, still faintly curled, like it had remembered how she once pressed it to my lips. And suddenly, I felt it again. That night, the small gasping laugh she gave when I kissed her wrist, the way she sat on the edge of the bed, one glove off, the other still on, like she couldn't quite decide whether to surrender or seduce. I never told her this. It was the glove that undid me, not her skin, not her voice, but that tension of what remained covered. In the years after, I told myself it had been a brief affair, a Parisian detour, a beautiful mistake. But there are things the body remembers, even when the mind lies, like the exact weight of her head on my shoulder, or how she would hum when she fell asleep, and how, every morning, she'd smell her own wrist, the gloved one, as if checking whether time had washed her away. I wrapped the glove in a silk scarf and placed it beside my bed. I didn't need to sleep, not yet. I just needed to lie still, in that half-dark silence, where the scent still lived, and remember what it felt like to be undressed slowly, not with hands, but with memory. There are moments I revisit, like rooms with one window open, just enough to let in the scent of something familiar, just enough to remind me what I lost. This afternoon, it was the rain, the kind that falls softly against glass, not a storm, but a suggestion. And just like that, I remembered the night she wore the green dress. It had a back like a sigh, dipped low enough to reveal the trail of freckles along her spine low enough to make every button feel like a promise. "Do you know why I chose this dress?" she asked, twirling just once in the candlelight. "Because it makes you look dangerous?" I replied. "No," she said, "because it slides off easier than it goes on." And she was right. I remember the way the fabric pulled at her ankles, not fallen, but released. We didn't even make it to the bed that night. The rug, the wooden floor, the glove pressed between our hands like a pause. She always left something behind when she visited me, a ribbon, a postcard, the curl of a smile on a pillow, but never the full story. I didn't ask, because some women, the rare ones, are more spell than person. To name them is to break the charm. One morning, she brought a notebook with her. "Don't read it," she said, setting it on my nightstand. "Then why leave it?" I asked. "So you'll think about it." And I did, for weeks, until the day I woke and she wasn't there. No note, no scent, only the glove and the untouched notebook. What would you do if the one thing left of someone you loved was a smell, not a photograph, not a voice recording, just scent? I held the glove to my face again. The softness had faded, the scent had changed. More leather now, less her. But still, I closed my eyes and saw her again, not in full, but in flashes. Her hair undone, catching the morning light. Her fingers at the small of my back, guiding me like a waltz. The way she'd lean in, nose to my neck, and whisper, "You smell like secrets." I kept the glove beside my bed for years. Sometimes I wore it, not both, just the one, the way she had, to remember what it felt like to touch something meant only for you. I would walk around the flat with it on, letting my fingers rest where hers had been. It sounds mad, I know, but grief is a strange kind of intimacy. One night, drunk on something older than wine, I opened the notebook. It was filled with tiny sketches, hands, always hands, some traced, some imagined, some labeled with words like "the touch that stayed," "the pressure just before a kiss," "what I remember after." On the last page, she had written only one sentence: "No glove is ever truly empty." I saw her once again, years later, a gallery in Lisbon. She didn't see me, or maybe she did and chose not to. She was standing in front of a painting, a woman, half turned, one hand gloved, the other bare, the same glove. I watched as she tilted her head, arms folded, lips barely parted. A man joined her, younger, taller. He placed his hand at the small of her back, and she didn't flinch. I didn't say hello, didn't follow her, didn't write. Instead, I went back to my hotel and unpacked what little I'd brought. And among the shirts, the socks, and the travel-worn pages of books I'd never finish, the glove had come with me. by accident, or by some small rebellion in my blood. That night, I wore it again and lay still, not to sleep, but to remember. Her laugh, soft and close, her mouth just above my ear, her gloved hand cupping my jaw, and the way she once said, "Every love is a costume. Some fit too well, some leave creases, but you're the one I don't want to take off." There was one night she stayed longer than usual, not until dawn, not until the sound of trams rang through the city, but long enough that I let myself believe. She sat by the window in nothing but a man's shirt, mine, of course, the sleeve half rolled, her bare thigh crossed over the other, skin catching the amber glow of the reading lamp. "I should go," she said, not moving. "You say that like you mean it." "I don't." "Then don't. Then love me." That last part. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a plea. It was a dare. I rose from the bed, slowly, unsure if I was dreaming, and she watched me the way a candle watches its own flame flicker. I knelt in front of her and pressed my face to the side of her knee. She smelled like the summer my heart made a mistake it didn't regret. Later, she asked if I believed in touch that lingers. "You mean like scent?" I said. "No, like a touch that leaves something inside you. A bruise, a warmth, a mark only you can feel." I kissed the inside of her wrist slowly. She turned her head to look out the window. "Some touches," she whispered, "are loud, even after silence." She didn't leave that night. She stayed, slept with her leg tangled in mine, one glove on the floor, the other, she kept it on. That was her, always half here, half mystery. I asked her, "Why do you only ever wear one glove?" She smiled, eyes still closed. "So, I remember which part of me is allowed to touch and which is meant to be remembered." The next morning, I made coffee. She didn't drink it. She only held the warm cup between her palms. "Do you love me?" she asked. I should have said yes. I should have said, "I love you more than the hours we've hidden, more than the places your name lingers in my flat." But I didn't. I said, "I think about you when I shouldn't." She nodded, as if that was enough. We didn't speak of feelings again, only of places we might go. She said she wanted to ride a train with no destination, that she wanted to lie under stained glass shadows in an abandoned chapel, that she wanted to hear me say her name underwater, just to see how it changed. Weeks passed, then a month. She started arriving later, leaving earlier, sometimes without a word, sometimes without a kiss. Once I came home to find her glove in the mailbox. No note, just the glove, cold and soft, and still shaped like her hand. One night, I found myself at a bookshop. Not one we had visited, but the kind she would have loved. There, between two dusty volumes of Rilke, was a small pressed violet. and a note written in ink I recognized. Some goodbyes are so soft, they feel like a breath on the back of your neck. I looked around, no sign of her, but for a brief moment, I thought I smelled her again. That faint trace of sandalwood, ink, and something warmer, the scent of a memory mid-sigh. Back at home, I tried writing her a letter. I filled 3 pages, tore them up, started again, wrote only, "I remember the night you didn't leave more than all the ones you did." I didn't send it. Instead, I folded it, placed it under the glove in my drawer, and left it there like an unfinished confession. Nights blurred into each other. I tried going out, meeting new people, but every shoulder I kissed, every laugh I feigned, felt like tracing letters I didn't understand anymore. I missed the quiet with her, the way she'd lie there and say nothing, yet I'd feel like I was being read. Then came the dream, the one I've never shaken. She's standing in the kitchen, wearing only the glove and a crooked smile. The window's open and the curtain brushes her hip like it knows her better than I ever did. She walks up to me, lifts my hand, places it over her heart, and says, "Do you remember how I feel?" I nod, but my dream mouth doesn't work. I can't say it, can't name what I lost. She leans in and says something I've never told anyone. "You never kissed me like you were sure I'd stay." And then she disappears. I woke up with the glove on my chest. It wasn't there when I fell asleep. I think part of her never left. Or maybe I'm the one who stayed too long in the space she used to fill. Love like that doesn't end. It just lingers, like perfume on letters never mailed, like skin that still feels the ghost of silk, like a glove that fits no one else. There was one night she stayed longer than usual, not until dawn, not until the sound of trams rang through the city, but long enough that I let myself believe. She sat by the window in nothing but a man's shirt, mine, of course. The sleeve half rolled, her bare thigh crossed over the other, skin catching the amber glow of the reading lamp. "I should go," she said, not moving. "You say that like you mean it." "I don't." "Then don't. Then love me." That last part. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a plea. It was a dare. I rose from the bed, slowly, unsure if I was dreaming, and she watched me the way a candle watches its own flame flicker. I knelt in front of her and pressed my face to the side of her knee. She smelled like the summer my heart made a mistake it didn't regret. Later, she asked if I believed in touch that lingers. "You mean like scent?" I said. "No, like a touch that leaves something inside you. A bruise, a warmth, a mark only you can feel." I kissed the inside of her wrist slowly. She turned her head to look out the window. "Some touches," she whispered, "are loud, even after silence." She didn't leave that night. She stayed, slept with her leg tangled in mine, one glove on the floor, the other, she kept it on. That was her, always half here, half mystery. I asked her, "Why do you only ever wear one glove?" She smiled, eyes still closed. "So, I remember which part of me is allowed to touch and which is meant to be remembered." The next morning, I made coffee. She didn't drink it. She only held the warm cup between her palms. "Do you love me?" she asked. I should have said yes. I should have said, "I love you more than the hours we've hidden, more than the places your name lingers in my flat." But I didn't. I said, "I think about you when I shouldn't." She nodded, as if that was enough. We didn't speak of feelings again, only of places we might go. She said she wanted to ride a train with no destination, that she wanted to lie under stained glass shadows in an abandoned chapel, that she wanted to hear me say her name underwater, just to see how it changed. Weeks passed, then a month. She started arriving later, leaving earlier, sometimes without a word, sometimes without a kiss. Once I came home to find her glove in the mailbox. No note, just the glove, cold and soft, and still shaped like her hand. One night, I found myself at a bookshop. Not one we had visited, but the kind she would have loved. There, between two dusty volumes of Rilke, was a small pressed violet and a note written in ink I recognized. Some goodbyes are so soft, they feel like a breath on the back of your neck. I looked around, no sign of her, but for a brief moment, I thought I smelled her again. That faint trace of sandalwood, ink, and something warmer, the scent of a memory mid-sigh. Back at home, I tried writing her a letter. I filled 3 pages, tore them up, started again, wrote only, "I remember the night you didn't leave more than all the ones you did." I didn't send it. Instead, I folded it, placed it under the glove in my drawer, and left it there like an unfinished confession. Nights blurred into each other. I tried going out, meeting new people, but every shoulder I kissed, every laugh I feigned, felt like tracing letters I didn't understand anymore. I missed the quiet with her, the way she'd lie there and say nothing, yet I'd feel like I was being read. Then came the dream, the one I've never shaken. She's standing in the kitchen, wearing only the glove and a crooked smile. The window's open and the curtain brushes her hip like it knows her better than I ever did. She walks up to me, lifts my hand, places it over her heart, and says, "Do you remember how I feel?" I nod, but my dream mouth doesn't work. I can't say it, can't name what I lost. She leans in and says something I've never told anyone. "You never kissed me like you were sure I'd stay." And then she disappears. I woke up with the glove on my chest. It wasn't there when I fell asleep. I think part of her never left. Or maybe I'm the one who stayed too long in the space she used to fill. Love like that doesn't end. It just lingers, like perfume on letters never mailed, like skin that still feels the ghost of silk, like a glove that fits no one else. If you're still awake, then maybe you weren't listening with your eyes closed, or maybe your heart just needed one more story to hold on to. Which of the three stories stayed with you the longest? Or which scent still lingers when you turn out the lights? I read every comment, so let me know. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this quiet corner of the night. There's always one more secret waiting under the pillow.